and officially welcome you all to today's webinar, which is looking at implementation of video analysis for matches and training. Delighted to have Mark Hawkins with us today. Mark's a former teammate of mine, but I'll let him introduce himself properly shortly. As we've mentioned already about questions, please feel free to use the chat box or use the raise hand function. Recordings are going to be posted as usual, and yeah, the security stuff is that the screen sharing is disabled, and if we do have an incident, then we'll have to obviously terminate the fine. Fingers crossed. Okay, Mark, thanks for taking the time to join us today, and I'll let you crack on with your presentation, mate.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, from me. Really happy to be here and yeah, talk to you about video analysis in handball. Just share my screen here. Can we? Is that all right, Bob? Are we?
Yeah, you're good.
Good. Okay. So we talk about video analysis in handball. It's here some of the aims of what we're going to be talking about.
Mark,
yes.
Just interrupt you for 1 second. It would be really cool if you gave a quick oversight as to your background in this area,
Sure.
your academic experience, your experience working with other teams, and your experience in handball would be great.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, as Bob mentioned, sort of we're ex-teammates, a former player for the national team in Great Britain. Since then, gone into coaching, coached some of the Great Britain youth national teams, was a skills coach, and led on the analysis for the Chinese women's national team at the World Championships in 2017, and now I'm coaching myself in Norway. From an academic point of view, I have studied sports science and have a master's in performance and statistical analysis of sport as well. Did that in Cardiff as I was playing. So yeah, so it is sort of quite an extensive background in analysis, and some of the things that we're talking about here, I suppose you could suggest are more scientific, in inverted commas, parts of video analysis. When you like to see here some of the common mistakes I put there. So some maybe areas where we can go wrong with our analysis, or we can focus on the wrong things like that. Psychological aspects of taking in information and what information you're giving, and then some of the different phases and the gains and ways of using video to implement change and development, coaching, and sort of, especially in this moment where we don't have access to our players on court in the same way as normal, then you know how things like that can be used to help us coach and to improve at the moment when we're not able to physically access the handball court. So here, this is kind of what we're going to be going through. So I called it "What is analysis?" But these are the four main sort of areas in 3 phases that we can see. Descriptive, what has happened, looking, using video mainly to draw information from. Why it happened and what will happen is more predictive things around, let's say, if we're reviewing a past performance, preparing for an upcoming opponent, something like that. And then, as mentioned there, how, or prescriptive at the end, how can we implement change, which will be the last part of what we talk about. So starting with the descriptive part, analysing what happened. So if we start on the right-hand side of the screen here, some of the sort of statistics and psychological theories that are important here. And these are more things that I would suggest are a reason why we need to use video, or why it's important to use video. The top 2 statistics there, the studies. The first one is a while ago, 1986, say non-elite coaches. For reference, that was, they were PE teachers, analysing football matches and then recalling how much of the game they were able to, how much they remembered. And this was 42%, 4 out of 10, obviously less than half. when this study was recreated some years later with high level coaches specific to the sport who were kind of paid professional coaches. This was nearly 60%, which is still just over half. I know we'll have a range of different coaches and different levels in here, so I mean you can place yourself within that, but that's also not it doesn't mean if you reach a certain level you're going to reach 60%. That's obviously an average, and you'll be around these sorts of things, but it just highlights that there's a lot of the game that we're probably not accurately remembering. And the two theories below, relatedness and availability, is especially relatedness I find all the time. In the last game we played before lockdown here, there was a situation towards the end of the game, defender was sort of out of position, and we conceded a lot of goals from that area in the game. And I remember my assistant coach saying to me, clip all the videos of that together. And then actually when I went back to look at it, there was just the one instance. But because that was a big moment, and often the big moments, we then relate all the other smaller things that happened around that area or things like it, and we relate it to the same thing, and that might not be quite correct. And things like that are probably where the 40-60% of things that we don't accurately remember come into our thinking. And availability, again, slightly similar, but you're looking at things like, or you're thinking about things that might be really prominent to you. So if before the game you had a specific plan about a specific player, their strengths, that might be the first thing you think of. So you're thinking of this first. So the first available thought is often what we associate to, and that's again possibly some of the traps that we fall into when we were doing analysis here. And then if we move over to the left side, I think it's important that and I did this when I first started analysing a lot as well, is that you try and record absolutely every single thing that happens in the game. And realistically, it's not possible. And that's spending the time to make sure you're getting the most out of your analysis and identifying the things that are really going to help you. Because I can guarantee probably if you're trying to cover absolutely everything, then you might have to spend all this time on it and then just come up with the 2 or 3 things that you always look at or always use. So you'd be much better off just looking at those couple of things. And these, especially, again, if, we're considering people of different levels or coaching at different levels, there are certain things that are much more relevant or much less relevant. And I've talked here a little bit, some of the trends, statistics, in my context with a team in a league, obviously we're looking for stuff over the course of the season. I'm going to talk a little bit in a moment about who's on the court and when. But it might be basic things. What defense were you playing against, or vice versa? Elements of game plan. So it might just be small details that, small areas where people are shooting from that you want to protect. So you just want to count small events that happens in those areas, or body language, attitude, things like that. I'll talk a bit about at the end, but some interesting stuff there. Here, this is just to show you and give you a bit of context. This is my sort of tagging window when I'm analysing games. I use XPS, Sideline Sports, I'm sure many of you are aware of. And you see this, it evolves every year. Like I said before, things that I find useful, things I don't find useful, things that I add in there. The main things that these windows here where it says player, on court and attack and defense during a game, if I'm analysing this live, this will show up the players on my team at that moment. So I'll be able to click on them, and I'll show you why that's important in just a moment. This is one of the main things that I get after a game. So the information I collect there, statistically, I put in and I get a shot chart like this. This is of us and this is our opponents. And for me, this is one thing that, I do feel it takes a little bit more time, but I get a lot more out of it because I think this is a far better representation of the game than this in terms of how I'm giving information back to my players. And so there's a lot more information that maybe I don't give to them, but this is one of the things that they really find easy to understand and to see, as opposed to the more traditional methods like this. The second one, and as I was mentioning, I was talking about who's on the court. This is something that I find incredibly valuable. On the left-hand side here, this is just an example of team tempo or the pace of the way they play, for example, and just highlights it for context. So this was an example of two players at the European Championships, the men's Euros in Austria and Norway, Sweden in January. Two players that finished in the top 5 scorers of the competition. You can see the first player here, over the course of 7 games, a lot more, 9 more goals at a percentage of 9% higher efficiency. It's quite a lot over the course of 7 games. But then if we take into account how fast or slow the teams played, player A's team plays a lot quicker. And actually, if you average that out per the amount of attacks, they end up with very similar statistics. So it's a way of differentiating between different teams' styles of play. And then also on the right-hand side, this is some information from my own team this year. You can see, you can count the amount of attacks and defenses they've played. And then these give percentages of how effective they've been or how ineffective they've been. And that's only possible if you know when they're on the court. And that's something that, again, I think I've found to be very, very telling and a lot of information. And one of the other things that I feel has been much worth spending time on. Okay, we move on a little bit from the descriptive stuff of what has happened into why things are happening and if we can predict them and how we might be able to predict them using some of the video as well. First of all, this is a quote I'll let you read for yourself. So this is Amos Tversky, a world-renowned psychologist, but he's talking about the art of prediction and forecasting and things like this. And this is essentially saying if we know, if we can explain what happened, then we can predict it. So, for example, when I was coaching with the British national team, we used to play an open defence. And we had one game, Finland, I think we were playing, where they decided to play 7v6 the entire time. We'd seen some video of them before. We were at a competition with them. We only had sort of 1 day in between matches to prepare. But we had no evidence from videos or matches they played against other open defences or any other way that they would play 7v6 against us. Obviously playing an open defence, that's always something that might happen, so it wasn't completely alien to us. But obviously without any information beforehand, we didn't prepare maybe in the same way we would have done. And it's easy with hindsight for me to say after the game to myself, we should have prepared against 7 against 6. But this is kind of what this statement is talking about, is that if it's only after knowing what happened that I can say I should have done that, then I have to go back and look before and try and find, was there any evidence for it that it was going to happen, or can I only see that example from what happened in the end? And we'll talk about that as well a little bit in terms of the things that we need to do and the things we can take from that.
Mark, just before you move forward, someone is relating back to the XPS categories that you've presented earlier. Mm-hmm. They're asking what it means, shot or assist X and Y in your shot X, shot Y, assist X, assist Y.
Sure.
And also they ask, what software do you create? Which software do you create the shot chart, the one you've presented after?
Yeah.
So if it's inside the XPS or if you use something different.
Sure. So the shot X and the shot Y, this is an XY coordinate. So I have a small chart which I made myself, which I can send out or maybe bring up at the end, where I can basically pause the screen when the shot's taken, and then I just make a note of where it happened on the court. And then, so that gives me the information to do this. And this is in Excel that I do this. So if you can sort of make a note of those things, then it gives you you can put it into a scatter graph essentially, which gives you the same, this output here. So it's
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. So yeah, as we're talking about sort of forecasting predictions, and this is one of the other things, because when we're talking about forecasting, we're not just talking about weather forecasting, but as kind of humans, forecasting is its own kind of industry or discipline within itself. So it's a lot of, we make it about handball matches. We're predicting what might happen in our head when preparing opponents. But, the weather one is a great example, because you often get these things, 70% chance of rain or something like this. And this is exactly the same thing as what we're trying to do when we're trying to predict the outcomes or the possibilities of things in a game. So it's often that we're not going to be in a situation where, well, almost never we're going to be in a situation where we can absolutely predict every single thing that's going to happen. But we're trying to reduce the odds and give ourselves the best possible chance of being able to understand what's happened. And I think sometimes when people get into analysis and statistics and video and things like this, they're almost looking for the golden bullet, the thing that's going to work every time, foolproof sort of systems, which really in a game like this is almost impossible. But it's about reducing the odds and giving yourself the best possible opportunity to make the best arrangements for each situation. And again, like this, if you say 70% chance of rain, you're going to take an umbrella. And it's the same sort of idea that if somebody's going to shoot, or you predict someone's going to shoot more in this situation, then you're more prepared to take your umbrella with you. And just highlighting a few of these things of how we can predict things. This is from an opponent my team played this year. These were the shooting or the shots from some of the games that we'd seen them play beforehand. And you can see there's some small trends, some obvious trends there. For context, the dashed line is the movement they make before they shot, and then the arrow is the direction of the shot towards the goal. There are some parallels to be drawn here, and then you can see in the second example, change the colours. For the green ones are from standing shots, and the red ones are from jump shots. So we can see there that the predictive element of what we're trying to see is not the position they shoot from, but the type of action they're making. And these are kind of classic signs. And although, like I talked about before, looking at percentages and looking to reduce the odds and things like that. This example and the next one I've got are almost kind of absolute, which is it happens every time, which isn't what you're always going to face, but I'm just using them to highlight the points that, you know, there are actions before different types of actions, and most players will have these types of traits and trends and things that they prefer to do. But again, it's about identifying the right things to identify and to practice. So, Bob, if you can put that YouTube link that we were talking about. Yeah?
Yeah, it's there.
Good. So put a YouTube link in the chat for you. You can have a look at the video. I'll play it on here and I'll talk through it. But essentially what we've got here is, this is one player who we had in the Chinese national team. This is 15 shots she had in one game at the World Championships. And what I want you to look for is essentially when she shoots one place, if it's successful, she shoots there again. If it wasn't successful, she changes to the other side of the goal. Okay, so we'll just play this through and we can talk about it a little bit afterwards. Okay. I hope some of you have been able to see that, or if not, you can go back and watch it in your own time with the link. But and why I highlight this is one of the interesting things. It's something that was observed in tennis first and tennis serves, and it's the same kind of principle that after a successful action, then people could be more prone to try the same thing again. And just with the example before with the shooter, it's just looking at different ways of explaining what might be about to happen or reducing the odds of finding out what things might be happening next. And I've used obviously these two examples with shooters and goalkeepers because I think it's probably areas that if people aren't able to spend a great deal of time on analysis and video and preparation and things, it's probably one of the easier wins, and it's something that probably people do a lot more of, sending clips of shooters to their goalkeepers. And this is something that you can, it's again, you know, this 15 shots in a game, I think there was one time she doesn't quite follow the pattern, but it's 14 out of 15 times it follows this pattern. Again, it's that situation that you're looking at that you increase the odds in your favor a little bit. And what is important from these examples is that once you see these are the things that are predictive of what your opponent, or it could even be your player, is going to do, then these are the things that you need to focus on in the training. So these are the things that you need. So if you were preparing to play against this Chinese team, you might have one player who is pretending to be that player, and then they're the one who, okay, every time you score, stay in the same corner. Every time you miss, move into the different corner, because then you need to train the players to see the things that they're going to see in the game. Okay, it's often maybe if you have a player who's very good from breaking in between 1 and 2, they're often just finishing, or you just take lots of shots from that position instead of the actual predictive part of what we're trying to see. And imagery in these things is really important. There's an example I know of from the top league women's football in England, where one team had a particular mental block. They were one of the best teams, but they could never overcome this other team in the top league. So they spent the week prior to the game in training. The opponent in the training was always in the kit of the other team. So they actually were playing and seeing the player so detailed, the movements of the players in the actual kit that the other team was playing in, so they could imagine these things happening beforehand. And, you know, they won that game. But it's these sorts of the key things that making sure that you understand or you can replicate as precisely as is possible the movements and the actions that you're likely to see. And I think this is especially for those who are able to, or who are using analysis like this and videos like this to prepare players and to prepare for upcoming matches and opponents and things like this. This is one of the most important things that you can probably take from the session today, is that it's all very well that we've done our analysis, why things happen, we've prepared for how they're happening, but then it's really important to go back and check this analysis. And like I mentioned with the example with my national team and 7v6 at the start, would you make the same decision again? And that, what I mean by that is not necessarily, but it's a lot of things. So it's, do you have any more information other than the outcome? So could it be that you see things in the game beforehand that you didn't see, or can you see things now that you didn't see before? So what I mean by that is, if I was to go back and look through all the videos of that opponent again, could I have found some actions to identify that maybe they were going to play 7 against 6? Were there things that I had missed, or was there no sign? And if there was no sign of it, then I probably would come to the conclusion I'd make the same decision again. But I think those things are really important. If I've got that point across, that it can even be if you're successful, you might win. You might win whatever game. You might be preparing against a very good left back, for example, and you think you've found a way to prevent this left back from doing what they're good at. You may still win the game, so you may not look at it again. But it could be that you're going to play, you know, the other 6 players weren't good enough and you actually didn't stop them. It was just other factors that meant you won the game. So it's really important that you can go back in and see, well, I thought I'd found the way to stop that player, but actually I hadn't. And if you keep going back through that, then you're able to learn to identify the things that are going to impact the decision. I hope I haven't butchered that point too much, but I hope it makes sense. But happy to take questions on that if there are any at the end. Okay, we're going to switch more into the prescriptive stuff now, and this is again more to do with how this can impact our coaching and playing, and especially a few ideas for the current situation, like I said at the start. So this refers to sort of a typical video analysis session after a match, or if it's videos of an upcoming opponent before a match, something like this. And I think one of the things is how much video and how long we should be looking at video for. And normally I there's a lot of times I think I've seen or have been in situations where we're watching whole matches and stuff, which I think is really something to try and avoid. A lot of the science sort of says if you're looking at maybe 3 clips of each incident or each kind of area to work on, and probably maximum 3 situations is going to be all that you're really going to be able to deliver, whilst keeping kind of the intensity and the enthusiasm and the understanding of the players. And that would be a ratio of probably 1 example of where things went wrong and 2 examples of where things were effective and things were good. And that would be, maybe 30 seconds a clip, like I said, 3 issues. So, you know, you're looking at probably no more than 9 clips of 3 different situations. I think here where it's like using positive examples, it might be that you don't have positive examples from your own team. You may not have successfully, you know, achieved something in a match. It's, you know, using other teams or elite teams, high level teams works equally as well. Because like we were talking a little bit about imagery before, again, if you just drill in 10, 12 examples of where your team got it wrong in the last game, all you're essentially doing is burning an image into their mind of what not to do. And, you know, under stressful conditions, under, you know, the conditions of a match, these are the images that are first going to come into the player's mind again. And that's what we, you know, obviously trying to avoid by having them as positive, good examples as possible, because when the video then comes into mind, it's the positive examples, the good clips that they're more likely to remember. The last thing, and I've just got a small video here. The content isn't so important, but it's more to show you that the different angles you can use. And obviously in the clip you can see quite a big space opening, and in a lot of halls, and this was an away match for us in our home court, we have it's walls behind each goal, so we're not able to do this. But whenever we get a chance in a venue that allows it, I try and film the games from this angle, because especially if you're working on decision making, these are, you know, more lifelike, more game-like positions to record from. For example, when we were with the Chinese team, we trained in Viborg in Denmark, and you know, they had 2 galleries above each goal, so we filmed everything from above there, and then we could work a lot better identifying decisions, because you can see the angles of the court and the space is a lot easier. So that's a small thing to consider if possible for some people. This is a reflective practice model, and this is something, again, like I mentioned, in these times where we're not able to train properly or play properly. This is something that I'll be using. I've used before to help players have a deeper understanding of their own decision making within the context of their own, or the team's model and style of play. So essentially what this does is it looks to, you share video clips, or you may decide that you want to pick out very specific individual video clips of events that have happened, things that games you played, or it might be of things that you want to develop, you want players to learn more about. So for the examples of this particular model, it's events that the player has had, but you can equally just adapt it slightly to, you know, if you had an elite player, you know, videos from a world championship or whatever that you wanted to implement, you could do this as well. So what it starts with is just a quick outline of here of the situation. So the players are writing down, you know, describing the situation that's in front of them, and why this is a situation. That might be something you give them or something they've picked. The rest of this is talking about essentially all the feelings, thinking, hearing, seeing, feeling, before the event. So this is, encouraging the players to understand the things they see, which leads to them making a decision. The actual decision-making moment in this area, and then what the outcome, what they chose to do. The court here is they can aid it with diagrams and things like this, and then this gives a chance for them to fill in at the end things like within the model of the team. So if they're making decisions they want or you would prefer as a coach, or if they want to change the way they make decisions, these are the ways that they can implement it within the context of what you as a coach are trying to get from the team, for example. This is something that you use from the XPS tool. This shows the same thing. On the left is just a laptop version, and on the right is a mobile phone version. But this is one thing I used that I think was quite successful, especially with national team when we were together all the time, and obviously we're training twice a day, and we might go away for a week or something like this in a training camp environment, where you can set up small clips of the video so this is for prior to training, to prime the athletes or your players so you know exactly what training is going to look like. So they have small videos showing them what the exercises are, and then a small example of where that fits in with the context of the team, or in the context of the style of play. So here we're just looking at protecting the line player, and this is where that exercise, the skills it's trying to implement within our game context. Again, this is the mobile phone version, so I could put this out either the evening before training or a few hours before training, so the players could start to look through this. They understand, they know what we're going to do in training, they understand the exercises first, so you save a bit of time, and also what the point of it is. And this is a really good thing I've seen quite a lot of high profile teams and coaches do to maximize efficiency and help to get across where the training fits towards the focus and the model of the team. Yes. One of the final things I want to talk about here is just, again, these are more examples of people who are aware of using videos in slightly different or unique ways or interesting ways. The top one, a coach, Carl Smith, in basketball college coach in San Francisco in America, calls his style nerdball. This is video, but very statistically weighted in terms of they video all of their training sessions, and they have hundreds of statistical categories for very, very small details, and each is given a score. If it's positive for the team, obviously up to +5, I think, and then negative examples are down to about -5. And so all these incidences, they record and use the video to give each player a score for the week. Obviously, things might be, if they're playing against a certain team of a certain style, things might have more of a value. And with these things, they actually give each player a score from the week, how they practiced, and then the ones with the high score start the game. So it's very, very fixed, very rigid. Might definitely not be suitable for a lot of situations, but it's an interesting way of showing how you can use kind of video to affect behaviors a little bit. And, it might be, and some of the other ones that we talk about here, Will Healy and Gino Auriemma, both similar cases. They've put a large value on body language and attitude of players. Austin P, the American football college team, I think they hadn't won a game for about 2 years when this young coach, Will Healy, took over. So first of all, he wanted to make sure that his team had good attitude, were enthusiastic, were celebrating all the things that went well, because obviously they weren't winning any games, but they needed to celebrate all the small victories that they had, scoring touchdowns, whatever. So he pointed cameras at the bench and at the end zone, and was basically, making sure that all the players were celebrating, and was showing them video clips of when they scored a touchdown, and just making sure that everybody was celebrating and everybody was happy in these moments, for example. And this is something, I've done a little bit. When I took over a new team, there wasn't so much enthusiasm on the bench all the time. And sometimes it's the players don't even know it. They don't even realize it, or they don't even know what they look like when they're on the bench or celebrating and things like this. So if you show them, it can actually have quite a big and interesting reaction. Or if you show them, I know Gino Auriemma, when he talks about, it's the body language of the players, and if they've been taken out of the game, that they're not kind of sulking and feeling sorry for themselves. And it's another thing. So if you can show them what they look like, then maybe this is something that gives them it gives them a good idea of maybe how their body language or something like that impacts the other players on the team. And then the final one, Julian Nagelsmann, rather famous coach in Leipzig Bundesliga, and he's been in the media a couple of times, and at his old club Hoffenheim, they installed huge video screens by the sides of the training pitch. Get this, and they were able to essentially train, then watch themselves back instantly on the video. And this is something, obviously, this isn't going to be immediately possible for almost anyone in handball, but on a smaller scale, these are things like almost everyone's going to have a smartphone or access to a smartphone at training. If somebody individual technique or shooting, they can shoot, and if you take a video of it, you can show this instantly back to them. Okay, and talked a little bit earlier about the ways in which you can analyze, and obviously the quicker you can do it and quicker you can show video, the easier it is for athletes to relate the mental processes or the physical feelings back to this. So this is something that is very, especially in this age, is a good way of doing it, and especially with younger kids as well. I mean, it can be the opposite way. So you could be looking at, bring a video of your favorite player, try and copy it, try and recreate it. These types of things are, fun for them to do, and it's good for them to try and look at them side by side, look at what I do, look at what my favorite player does. This is something, again, works really well. And I haven't actually put it on here, but also the use of, in terms of video films, movies, documentaries, things like this, when we're talking about behaviors like Healy and Auriemma were talking about, is that, you can, if there are certain things that you want from your team, the Michael Jordan documentary at the moment is a good example, is send them videos like this, ask them to discuss them and talk about them. This gives, an appreciation of, can we do this in our setting? Would this work in our setting? It provokes discussion. It's a lot more, what's the word for it? Yeah, probably a lot easier to get across a message if it's coming from maybe a film or a documentary or something, than the coach giving the same speech over and over again, for example. So yes, that is it from me for the moment. Please feel free to get in touch. I'm always keen to speak to people and understand what their context is, and what they're doing in their analysis and video and statistics and things like that. So if you do have comments, questions, or want to take contact after, then yeah, no, I'd be really, really happy to hear from you.
There's a few questions, if you're okay, and I guess we'll start by the latest one because it's a bit more relatable to the things you've just mentioned and to the discussion we've had prior to this meeting. So it questions the time you take to make those that analysis, and Johan Smith is a lucky guy because he practices 6 times a week and he still finds that there's not enough time to do that.
Yeah.
And I would also transfer that question to, coaches on this call that aren't that lucky and that have, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 sessions per week, sometimes less. What do you advise, or what are your considerations in regards to time spent doing that analysis and sending it to players?
Yeah. I think it's so using the XPS tool, that I think, and most, whether it's that one or another analysis tools, are the time savers in terms of, I can go through a game, tag things up, and then it's obviously a list linked to all the videos. So if I'm looking at my goalkeepers, for example, and it's all the shots the opponent made, I can get that video together very quickly. If you just have a video file and you're trying to cut it up on, I don't know, Final Cut or Movie Maker or something like that, it's very time consuming. For me, analyzing a game after a full match probably takes about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. And then, but the way I set it up with the tagging template allows me to draw a lot of information from it. So for example, like we talked about earlier with the small dots on the screen representing where the shots were, it takes maybe another 5-10 minutes on top of what I'm analyzing in a game in the tagging window to get that information. And then after I copy and paste it out of XPS, and it produces it in Excel. So I suppose I've been able to condense the time by doing things like that. But I think it's with, I understand, but it depends. I think if you're training 6, like for the example of training 6 times a week, it depends what you want to analyze. The example where I was talking about the nerd ball, I know in the American college team, he has a team of analysts that are doing this. So, there's probably 3 or 4 guys analyzing every video session. So it's not him as a coach having to do it all himself. I am not in a position, and never been in a position, so I'm sort of the same as the guy who asked the question. I'm not analysing training sessions in that detail. It's only the matches that I'm analysing in that detail. So yeah, but I think I'm not sure if that really answers the question, but it's...
Mark, Ewan came back asking that what he meant with this question was more the time it takes you to pre-show the training session, so to create those things you send to their phones.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm with you.
So
Sorry.
that they come to the session prepared. No, it was on me.
So that's again part of the XPS tool. So I can you can put a session plan together. So you obviously have to build up the database of all the videos of exercises and things like that. But once you've got them, you can just click them and then it sends it out to the players automatically. So actually that takes me 2 minutes to do. That's very quick once you've got it in place. Obviously, taking the time to build up the database, drawing, training sessions and things like that does take a bit of time. It depends, if you're doing it as you go, it's harder, but then obviously, it's more time at the start, but after you finish building it up, then it becomes a lot quicker. And for me, I've been doing this for a few years now, so I don't have to, well, it's only if I get new exercises one by one or something like that. So the time isn't that much to do it anymore.
But the point on that, Mark, I think, is that you're sending this information out to the players to access before they get to training. You're not taking up, your 2-hour training session or your 1.5-hour training session with going through this information. It's all available to the athlete on their phone.
Yeah.
Anything else, Ricardo?
There's a few more questions in the chat. One of them, the Rolando asks about your opinion on the correlations between the combination of parameters to win. So he asks if you believe, what's your opinion on if we can make it upon data analysis to predict winners?
Yeah. Yes, I think I said at the start, this wouldn't be too stats heavy, but there would be a crossover. But I spend a lot of time looking at stats and analysis as well. I think there are a lot of ways that you can do that with predictive modeling and things like that to, again, get a better idea of the things that are important. What I also believe at the moment is that the publicly available data for handball makes it a lot more difficult. The prevalence of things like this in other, particularly American sports, there's a lot more detailed, accurate data available. In handball, the data, there isn't really, there is some, but it's, between different countries. You get, obviously, there's no consistent data between the Bundesliga and the French league, for example, or even Champions League games. And a lot of the times the data isn't particularly accurate as well. So that makes it a lot harder. But there are ways of doing it and, again, if people want to get in touch about that, I'm always really keen to discuss ideas with people there, because I think there's a lot more that can be done.
There's another one, Mark, thank you. How much do you let players take the lead on a video session? So what kind of input do you allow when you're using the video analysis?
Yeah, good question. So it depends on a lot on the situation. For example, with the players I have at the moment, it's a case of I tend to go through it myself. And, for context, my players aren't professional players. They're very committed players who train every day, but they have other jobs, studies, things like that as well. So their preference is for, and we've discussed this, is for me to give them kind of video clips of the key areas of the game. Often then it turns into a discussion which they take a bit of a lead on, and I'd probably show them the clips first without saying much. They discuss them, they discuss the impact of what it means. But I think this is something that if you have a clear philosophy of how you're playing to start with, a lot of it feeds into that sort of thing. But I'm very keen. I would do, or I have done it more, preparing for another opponent to give videos of other teams to players. And then it's up to them if some are really keen to watch it and give ideas, some prefer to just be instructed. But they have the chance to do that, and then again bring their ideas and bring their ways to the video sessions. Did that a lot more when I had the British youth national team. And of course, with the national team setting, we don't have the constant access and the constant meetings or possibilities to do it in the same way. So a lot more then I would send them out videos and ask for their opinions and examples and things like that, to have, I suppose, distanced video meetings, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I suppose we're getting more into the detail of involving players in processes and talking more on the coaching side of things at the moment. James Adamson asked a question around the body language monitoring of that kind of stuff that you mentioned before with the college programs in the States. And his question is around what would be the impact of suppressing those kind of innate competitive feelings in players that are frustrated that maybe they've had a poor performance, and I understand this probably isn't an area of expertise for anyone leading this call, but maybe something you've got an opinion on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not necessarily. It's a really interesting point, but I think again it depends on what. I think it's possible to differentiate between actions that are harmful to the team and not harmful to the team. And I think you wouldn't want to suppress players in a certain way. And I think that's dependent on knowing your players. But it might be, something like that. They could be frustrated, but it's whether that, and the classic example that Gino or Emma talks about is if they're focusing on their frustration ahead of the team's success. And you can be annoyed, cheer when your team score, and then carry on being annoyed if that's kind of your process. But I think that's more of the sort of area looking into, and I would personally look into. But again, I think it's knowing your players, but I think it's an interesting point because but like in some of the examples, if you're scoring things or tracking things, it's got to be things that you believe to be worthwhile. And you could make a case for something like that not being worthwhile.
Yeah. And I guess that also then stems across into the cultural values of the team. You've mentioned before about sharing the stories of The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary, for example. Like, if players are openly discussing what behaviours are going to be helping us achieve our team targets, and that then becomes like accountable. The big players become accountable for their behaviour, and then not only can players police that, but it's also there in evidence on videos and stuff. So can lead into a sort of a deeper cultural, mutually beneficial relationship.
Absolutely. I think, and again, if you're in a situation where you build, and to compare it to a handball example, you'd be looking at, okay, this decision, successful or unsuccessful, wasn't what as a team we agreed we wanted as a tactic. It's exactly the same. Is this a behaviour that we agreed that we want or don't want? So yeah.
Awesome.
Good point.
I don't think, and Ricardo is correct.
There's just a couple more. The first one is in terms of practicality of observing games and observing patterns in set games, whether they are models or systems. How much does that observation impact on your session plan? So say if you observe a team that 70% of the times uses a set system and then 30% of the times uses a different system, would that make a direct correlation to the amount of time you would spend on each system in your sessions whilst preparing to face that team? Or would that just be merely informative, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I don't think I would structure my training time-wise like that, but naturally I'd spend more time on the things I feel are gonna happen more. So yeah, in that situation, if we say 70-30 one system, I'm probably going to spend more time on the thing I think is going to happen more.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, but I don't have a set structure for it. I wouldn't say specifically time.
Thank you, Mark. Just the last one for now, and it has to do with a bit of a discussion we had a couple of days ago, and when we were assessing the value of video analysis, I said, look, there's teams who have one session per week, and that might come across in a meeting. And you said something that stuck into my mind since then, which was then video analysis becomes even more important in that context. If you could maybe explore a bit further for coaches who are in the same situation, why do you think it becomes even more important? Although I know it might be a common sense, but it would be better coming from you.
Yeah, no, I think that's, and again, for those that have worked in national team context, like I know you do as well, you don't get access to your players as much. And it's the same principle if you're only training twice a week compared to a team that trains 4 times a week. The more time that you can spend doing things or looking at things, learning things, is, you know, more time that you're spending focus towards the goal. And I think especially with you know, I guess this is very different because you get situations where, you know, football in England is obviously huge, so kids grow up watching loads and loads and loads, so they got ideas and they can give you sort of tactical rundowns of whatever Guardiola is doing to the incredible detail. And it's almost trying to get more towards that type of situation. But with the reflective practice model I showed, that's a way of creating that deeper understanding. And so you can work on decision making as much as possible without being in a position to make a decision. It's just giving yourself more and more time to be able to practice and learn and develop and progress with the teams and progress with your styles. And I think, like I said, that's particularly important at the moment where we're not able to work with our players, so you can give as much sort of information in a way that's going to have the biggest impact.
Perfect. Thank you. Bobby?
Mark, there's just one more question, and it comes from another Mark, and it's around what's your top 3 tips on actually implementing a video analysis session, and he's used the word a great video analysis session. So yeah, top 3 tips.
Try not to talk too much. It's contrary to what I've been doing for the last hour or whatever it is. No, but I mean, use the videos, short, sharp videos, not long clips, and I think positive examples, as much positivity and good examples as possible.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate that. Well, that, guys, brings us to an end of the session. I want to say a big thank you again to Mark for taking the time out to join us this afternoon. I know he wasn't particularly busy, so I'm sure he's had a blast with us. We are on Friday with Bill Bailey presenting a proposal for the 3-3 defensive system. We hope you can join us for that. Guys, thank you so much, and stay safe. Cheers, Mark.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.